absent. Hillary Blackerby,
Here.
Ed France,
Here.
Howard Green, Susan Horn,
Here.
Kathleen Rodriguez, absent, and Chair Bosch.
Here. All right, are there any changes to the agenda?
There is none, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
seeing none. We'll move on to public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone here to comment on anything that is not on our agenda this evening. We'll have public comment on the things that are on the agenda in a couple of minutes. Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar and approval of the minutes from our October 29th joint meeting with the Planning Commission.
And move approval of the minutes.
I have a discussion.
Susan?
I just have a note that it said I was absent, excused, and I was here.
That's a problem. We'll fix that.
Yeah, and same for Kathleen. I think it was wrong for her. So I think they switched. But I also made a few minor comments that will be noted by staff outside the meeting.
It's actually you need to give your comments if they're going to if the committee is going to approve the minutes. You'd have to, if you want them incorporated into the minutes, you need to give them to us now. Or we could table the approval of the minutes. Two options.
Okay, let's see. See if there's anything. Spelling of a couple different speakers' names and a run-on sentence. That's it, nothing important. It's very readable and it's really great. Thank you.
Okay. Howard?
Small note, my name is spelled two different ways in the section. It doesn't have the E in the end.
Okay, we'll correct that.
Okay, and,
So I
Note that-
moved, but I didn't hear a second.
right.
So
Note that Committee Member Rodriguez just arrived. So we have a motion to approve the minutes on the table. Do we have a second? Okay,
As amended?
as
Right.
amended.
In favor.
So you're seconding, Howard?
Yes.
Hillary moved.
You can put that there.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. First item on the agenda is Bicycle Master Plan. We'll have a staff report.
Yes, Madam Chair and TCC members, just a note for the meeting. If you would like to speak on the bicycle master plan item, just bring your comments over to Malcolm. That'd be great. Good evening. Back at this juncture for the bicycle master plan, and want to explain to you the presentation for tonight, how we're going to handle things. Also, the Planning Commission met on this item, so I want to go over that. I first want to just talk about a little bit about the staff. You're already aware of who they are, but I just, because they're here, I don't see Jessica Grant, our project planner, here, but she will be here. Derek Bailey will probably be here as well and is listening from his office for questions that you may have. He's our traffic engineer, and then Peter Brown, our mobility coordinator, and of course I'm Rob Dayton, our principal transportation planner. And then also Shannon Davis is from our consultant team is here. We were able to save money, and she's our sole consultant team member here tonight. So as the process in the presentation, what we've done is just want to really make it clear about how, where we've done. We've come such a far way. You'll recall that we had a very rich, robust public process. We have lots of touch points. We spent a lot of time, the consultant specifically, explaining to you that whole process. And without getting into it, I just want to acknowledge that it's there. We went to the council before the summer and asked them, what type of plan they wanted. We brought that plan after we worked on it over the summer, an initial draft plan to you. And the first time that you saw it, that initial draft plan was on October 29th in this room. That was a joint meeting with the Planning Commission here as well. And so since that meeting, we have done a lot of work on that plan to incorporate your the things that you wanted to see in that plan. And so tonight, that's what we're here to talk about, is the incorporation of that plan. On top of that, I just want to note that we got a lot of comments from TCC members and Planning Commission members who they wanted to kind of have a little bit more time, and that meeting was kind of really, really long. So we were able to come to save money for the consultant. We did 2 meetings on one day. So the Planning Commission already had their meeting, but Shannon's still here on the same day, save some costs, but we're able to do that and accommodate you, so you have a little bit more time to engage on this subject. I just want to go over some of the things that this is going to be the highlights I'm going to give you, and then Shannon's going to come back with a lot more detail. Listening to you, and this is a combination of the Planning Commission and the Transportation Circulation Committee. Strengthening the network is what you wanted to see. We saw Sharrows were not preferred, and then to revisit the plan in 2020, the highlights of importance of safe routes to school. And that has been added into the priority listing for every single phase of the plan as a priority. You asked us to clarify the network facilities and phasing. As this is a dynamic process, when we gave you the initial plan, we've put that a little bit more in exact terms for draft for you to consider tonight. And then also closing the gaps is something that really came through, and that was already a policy that was a draft policy in the plan, but that's something that both the committee and the commission echoed strongly they wanted to see with high quality facilities. And one of those high quality facilities that was the Mitchell-Trena crosstown route. And as you will recall, when we came back from council, staff got the direction, don't include that. So when you saw the plan, it wasn't there. You guys heard a lot of input from the public and decided to, hey, we want it in our draft plan that goes to council, we want to see that. So because you did that, we really wanted to do what we had done with everyone else, and that is, we had parking issues, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, about the parking removals that we had on other streets. But we wanted to go see the public who wasn't notified on Mitchell-Trena. So we're going to tell you about that meeting, because we came up with a parking removal analysis, something else you asked for. What if we did the Mitchell-Trena bike lanes? What would be the effects of parking? And then finally, the traffic and safety analysis for the CEQA requirements. This meeting and the Planning Commission meeting before it fulfilled the noticing requirements, and just want to make sure that you know that that's happening. And then for the details of what I just explained to you, I'm going to hand it over to Shannon Davis.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, members of the public. Thank you for being here tonight. Good evening. My name is Shannon Davis. I am a senior associate at Melendrez. We've been working on the Bicycle Master Plan for just about a year now. And as Rob mentioned, we want to go through some of the changes to the Bicycle Master Plan that have happened since you've seen it last on October 29th. And so systematically for this portion of the presentation, we'll go through each of the chapters and talk about the high-level changes that have really that have been captured as a result of that input that we received. And so we'll just start off with the introduction chapter. So loud and clear, we heard that Safe Routes to School, that's SR2S, needed to be incorporated more broadly and louder in the document. And so we've integrated that throughout the chapter. The first way we did that was to upfront, when we're talking about safety for all road users as the primary goal, we have mentioned now Safe Routes to Schools in that chapter. We've also talked to the Coast Safe Routes to School coordinator and talked about some of the language to add to that portion of the chapter where we talk about some of the programs that they're doing currently. So that has been enhanced and upgraded. In addition, we've also identified parties responsible for the implementation of the plan. That was a direct request out of that previous meeting. And as a side note, for all of you that are looking at the plan right now, and that for those of you that might look at it online, additional language and edits that have been made to the plan since the October 29th meeting are now in pink in the plan, and that's just to highlight even the minor changes that have been made to the plan to date, so that you can see the difference between the two. In Chapter 2 of the plan is really about community outreach and input received. There were very minimal corrections to the language in that portion of the plan, reason being that's a lot of information that has been kind of received in various Transportation Circulation Committee meetings and Planning Commission meetings, and has also been reviewed by staff at length. And so there were minor changes to that chapter. Chapters 3 through 6 are really about the goals of the plan as identified. So it's important to note that a lot of the changes that happened within those chapters have to do with the implementation strategies that are recommended in those chapters, which are really the meat, the gut of the document itself. And so just to jog everyone's memory, implementation strategies, as we define it in the document, are actions that may be considered to implement the larger goal. So those goals being, safety for all road users, it was just chapter 1, and et cetera, and we'll get into the following chapters. So implementation strategy 1.1.1 is ensuring access on all roads, and we've modified that to include language that integrates facility maintenance during resurfacing and repaving, routine things that the city is doing, and to consider possibilities for enhancing places for people to ride bikes as the city is working on those efforts. Strategy 1.3.1, third-party education, has been expanded to expand the list of potential partner organizations that the city may work with. 1.3.6 has been added, which gets at multimodal safety awareness for all modes. So that includes bicyclists, that includes motorists, transit riders, transit users, and pedestrians alike. And 1.4.2 has been added, which is a ticket diversion program, which is in compliance with Assembly Bill 902, which states that it allows any person of any age who commits an infraction that involves not involving a motor vehicle to participate in a ticket diversion program. So that's also been added to this chapter. Chapter 2, or goal 2, chapter 4 is about closing gaps in the network. And we'll talk at length about the changes that have happened to the facility map when we get to chapter 7, when we kind of dial more into depth about those particular facilities. But also in this chapter, it is important to note that a parking removal map or suggested parking removal map has been added into this chapter as well to, again, give clarity to what we're really talking about in terms of numbers and what side of street parking removal is being considered upon. Chapter 5, which is goal 3 about multimodal access, there are very minor changes to this chapter. Implementation strategy 3.1.3 has been modified about bicycle parking at transit facilities, so there's a rewording of where to consider key transit facilities to include bicycle parking at. 3.2.6 pertains to bicycle parking at events, and there's been rewording of that particular strategy about the language there. Chapter 6 is about infrastructure, so creating a Santa Barbara, or encouraging that Santa Barbara become a model of infrastructure and bicycle facilities. And so as part of that, a new key measurement of success was added. There was an ask at the last meeting to kind of beef up the intentions of this chapter here. And so the language that has been added states that by the end of 2017, to address key safety issues, the city will complete projects that create Class 2 lanes, road diets, Bath and Castillo couplet extensions, and conflict green striping along the spine network. So that specifically are those Lower State and Haley and Coda, which are kind of in a greenish yellow on your screen. But really, putting the push on the city to make big changes fairly soon. So we're talking about by the end of 17, seeing some of those come into play. Implementation strategy 4.1.4 discusses best practices, and it now includes street lighting along facilities as a best practice and along new facilities that are added to the network. 4.1.8 includes plan monitoring. So this states that in the years in the years 2020 and 2025, so in these 5-year increments, the city shall revisit and amend, if deemed necessary, the Santa Barbara Bicycle Master Plan goals and network needs. And then in addition, implementation strategy 4.1.9 has been added. This is about peak hour lane conversion. So there was some consideration about some of the issues of enforcement of peak hour lanes in the city currently. And so this new implementation strategy suggests considering conversion of peak hour bike lanes into either full-time bike lanes or full-time parking, or into a bicycle-friendly street. So Chapter 7 gets at the recommended bicycle facilities. So we touch upon it briefly in Chapter 4, and then we really get into it in Chapter 7. I do want to say that each facility type is now identified in the project name. So be it a bike lane, be it a bicycle boulevard, so that there's more clarity and less confusion about what each facility is proposing in the title. And so that's reflected throughout the document now. There have also been an addition of detailed cut sheets for all the high-level 2020 projects, and that comes into play in Chapter 8. And then there were a series of network changes that we heard kind of loud and clear in the previous October 29th meeting. So Mitchell-Torena has been restored in the bicycle facility suggestion, and we will be talking about that more at length in a little bit. Castillo, US 101, and Haley have been upgraded to bike lanes. State Street now very specifically includes 3 phases, so that it's more clear about what the phases are and kind of when those are suggested to happen in the timeline. Traffic signal bicycle detection has been added on Las Positas and Cliff Drive. The Montecito-Castillo intersection improvements have also been recommended. Loma Alta as an enhanced route. Foothill Road bike lanes have been added to the map. And Foothill Route, not Foothill Road, but the Foothill Route that was suggested originally is now connecting to Alomar. So there was a gap in the network there that has been taken care of. Milpas from Coda to Haley has been upgraded to bike lanes. So just for that one block there. And then gap closure on Laguna, Los Olivos, and Garden has been added in addition to an Ortega footbridge. So this map shows all of those changes and reflects all of those changes. It also now incorporates the existing route. So that was a question that we heard as well at the last meeting, to show the existing network in the context of the proposed network. So you'll see on the newly revised map that the solid lines show you what is existing today, and the dashed lines in various colors, differentiated colors, show what is proposed as part of this plan. So Chapter 8 is the Making It Happen chapter, where we talk about the 3 buckets, I guess, of 5-year implementation projects, groupings of projects. So Loma Alta has been added to Phase 1, as has Montecito-Castillo intersection. And Safe Routes to School is listed as a #1 priority project, and a priority program, excuse me. And that occurs during all 3 of the buckets there. So in 2020, 2025, and in 2030. Additionally, what's new as well is a complete appendix, which now includes the outreach and media strategy, the public outreach findings, traffic safety and impact analysis for CEQA exemption, general plan elements, goals, and policies that have been consulted in the generation of this particular plan, additional background documentation, which is really speaking to the American League of Bicyclists and how to get to a higher standard. There is a key measurement of success in the document that speaks to getting gold standard, and so this section kind of shows some of the key tenets in order to get there, according to the American League of Bicyclists, and a bicycle collision analysis. Much of that is summarized in Chapter 1 as well. In addition to that, there was a request to look at the existing Class 1s and 2s throughout town, and then to think about how one would, I guess, traverse the city through the network. And so we did this exercise, and in addition to that, we also looked at collisions that have occurred that were mappable. So of the 1,051 collisions that occurred, 495 were mappable, and they're shown on this map in small red circles there. And so in addition to that, then we also looked at the proposed Class 1s and 2s and bike boulevards and overlaid that on top of the existing route and on top of the collisions. All really to say that if we're looking at heightening these facilities, there's a potential for really reducing some of the collisions that have occurred between that 2008-2012 time span in the future. So potentially 259 or 52% of those collisions may be removed from future projections. So at this point, I'll go ahead and pass the presentation over to Peter Brown, who will speak about some of the parking removal that's been studied and continue on.
Thank you, Shannon. I might just add, if somebody might have the question, well, we're getting at 52 of them with the network improvements, 52%, and what about the other 48? The answer to that question, and you can see it here, is we have so many intersection level collisions. So many of our intersections experience collisions. So we're obviously not going to put a bike lane or improvement at every intersection, but that is just kind of the nature of the game. So we can do some things education-wise. That's why we have all those multimodal education things in there. But in terms of facility improvements, it seems like this analysis does show a very good faith effort to get at as many of the collisions as we could. In terms of the parking removal, I just want to kind of review a couple of things. The one is that prior to our joint meeting on October 29th, we did hold 2 open houses, one over at the junior high, Santa Barbara Junior High on Coda Street. And that was a fairly well-attended meeting, and we got a lot of input. We have some creative ideas to take the bike lane off of the street and set it into some perhaps school district property or city's parks property. Those are alternatives. In any event, we had a good input. Some people not happy with the proposal, others very supportive of it. It's 4 blocks, it's one side of the street. It seems feasible with a palatable amount of pain for those who are going to lose parking access. I would say similarly on the west side, when we looked at these 1 block spot locations on one side of the street of Rancheria or Haley, 6 spaces here, a dozen spaces there. It seemed as though this was, again, key to closing gaps in the network, fairly palatable and doable projects. If you recall, and I think this is very important for the audience members and for the committee members to know, on October 29th, these were the parking removal projects, and we talked about them then. And the direction we got from the committee and the commission was Mitchell-Terrain is an important gap closure, and it needs to come back in the plan. And so between October 29th and this meeting, we had to scramble to, okay, well, we got to talk to the community, we got to mail them, we got to try and have a meeting. We did those things. And the main purpose of that meeting that we held on open house on November 30th was to hear from the residents and business owners along this corridor. And to be quite honest with you all, many of them came to our workshop and expressed some displeasure with the proposal. Here's a summary of that outreach. We took a look at the written comments that were on the maps that were spread around the room, and about 26 folks supported the proposal. 3 of those identified that they lived on the corridor. Some of the themes we heard, that the West Side connection was really needed. Safety for bicycle riders and all travelers was a concern. And while they understood the inconvenience of a parking loss on that street, they certainly felt like the trade-off was worthwhile. And I would say a more, obviously more numerous and perhaps even more vocal opposition came out and said 43 folks wrote on the map, 23 of them identified living on the corridor. They let us know that business access and parking were very important to them. They had concerns regarding folks with disabilities or elderly being displaced or having difficulty loading and unloading. They talked about certain properties not having off-street parking, both for commercial and residential. And so, you know, those are legitimate concerns, and we heard from them and we documented them for you. And we had about 17 other comments on those maps that didn't really take a position one way or the other on Mitchell-Terrain. Also, between October 29th and today, we've done what I would call a vacancy survey of the neighborhood. And we did it on 4 different occasions. We did it on different days of the week. We looked at Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. We did it between 1:30 and 3 o'clock. We looked pre-lunch, 10 to noon. And then we did an evening count on a Tuesday evening after we assumed many people would have come home from work. And so the numbers you see here are the vacancy rates, the percentage of spaces not occupied on these various streets. So what does that look like in whole numbers? I have copious amounts of spreadsheets that I can share with you all, and I don't really want to, but if you want to see them, you can. I tried to distill all this information into a couple maps and slides that are before you now. But the total number that we counted was around 1,050 spaces on the 2 blocks above and below Mitchell-Terrain. And of those 1,050 spaces, it looks like within 2 blocks at this time in the afternoon after lunch, there's around, in our sampling, 350 or so spaces. If you just look at within 1 block, it's closer to 180. If you look at the time between, say, before lunch, between about 10 in the morning and lunchtime, similar numbers, a few more vacancies in the 1 block radius. And then the time that we anticipated would be most impacted in the evening when folks are home, actually quite similar numbers, over 300 vacancies out of 1,050 within 2 blocks and about 180 vacancies within 1 block of Mitchell-Torrena. And this is only between State and Castillo. So I want to be clear about something, and maybe this is a good time to interject. Your motion was to look at going all the way to Anacapa, and for various reasons, one of which was time constraints in getting our analysis done, we can still look all the way to Anacapa if you'd like, but we are leaning towards, the study certainly looked only to State, and we feel that there's some rationale to connect to the spine network on State as opposed to Anacapa. But the numbers before you, to be clear, are only to State. This is what it looks like when you map it versus our land uses, our different zones. We've got some R4 zone, there's commercial zones here as well. And if you zoom in on that, the Mitchell-Torrena corridor, this is basically Castillo to State Street. The black numbers are a survey of vacancies available on each of these blocks. So on Castillo and on Arriaga, there's the numbers in the evening. If you want to know the numbers at around 11 a.m., that's the summary for the 10 to 12. And the 2 p.m. is the 1 to 3. Those numbers are both shown by block in that area. So the total, again, is around 180. And the total capacity of Mitchell-Torrena is close to 85 spaces. So there does seem to be, by our survey, more spaces vacant around Mitchell-Torrena than would be potentially removed. Another way to slice it, we showed vacancy numbers just then. This handout shows number of cars counted versus number of spaces available for the parallel streets in teal, and then the north-south streets are also shown. So we've skinned it several different ways, but the results remain the same. And those are just different times of day, and those are in your handouts as well. So just to wrap up, this is the last couple slides here. I'll turn it back to Rob for any closing comments. But what we're looking for the Transportation and Circulation Committee to do today is answer these questions. Are the changes that you requested, have they been incorporated and reflected in the document? I do know that the document we sent you is not typo-free. I confess to that, and we have caught a lot of those, and thank you very much for your careful readings and suggestions of those changes. We've got those done now. The second question is, do any policies or projects need changing based on what you know or what you'll hear from the public today? And then at the end of the night, the action would be to recommend the bicycle master plan to the city council as it is, or as your committee chooses to amend it tonight.
I just want to, just for clarity, there's kind of 2 big pieces to this meeting. There's the first part, you gave us all this direction on what you already saw. And then there's this second part about Mitchell-Torrena that you asked us to go investigate, and we did. And I do want to just clarify that, we did the parking study and the numbers. Those are 3 specific days. It's not a range of days. And there is a lot of change in parking. And as we told the Planning Commission, it's dynamic. It's going to change. And so I just don't want to get the impression that this is hard, fast. On some days it's worse. On some days it might be better. And in the parking world, I use the example of the Planning Commission knows best, and just to explain it to you, when we look at parking supplies, like in the downtown, for downtown lots, when the parking supply gets at about 85%, we almost consider that to be full because there's a lot of struggle with the changeover. So if that could be any gauge for the neighborhood being full, hopefully that gives you we want to give you the accurate picture that there is parking issues here. It's not, you always just find a space when you want to find a space. That said, when we did the survey, I personally was surprised at how many spaces we did find at the times we did look. What else do we want to say? So do want to tell you, just report with the Planning Commission. We had their meeting. It was a very, very good meeting in terms of the conversation. What we're looking for here is a rich community conversation. That's at the end of the day the goal. I think we had that. We had Commissioner Peugeot recuse herself because she had property that she owned on Mitchell Trena and had a conflict of interest. And then we had a 5-1 vote in favor of forwarding the bicycle master plan as edited, including the Mitchell Trena bike lanes, only to state, not to Anakepa, but only to state, to the council. Our plan is after this meeting, in the conclusion of this meeting, that we would probably in February, we're counting on probably 2 meetings at council. As you know, we do a very thorough process in Santa Barbara. It's lengthy, but thorough. So we're looking, as Peter said, for that recommendation at the end, and we'll entertain any questions you have on the plan so far that we've edited.
Okay, it was suggested that I open the floor to questions from committee members first, and then we'll go to public comment after we've gotten those questions answered. So withhold your comments for now, but just if you have specific questions of staff, this is a good time to ask them. Kathleen?
Yeah, Rob, can you clarify, you mentioned 85%. You were referring to this representation of the parking, right? So I wanted to be real sure I understood. Okay, so you were saying that it's kind of a generous estimate?
Yeah, when we look at parking, this is the percentage available on any one of those blocks. And when we look at it downtown, we look at 85% as being full. We don't wait till we get to the 100% mark. That was that point.
Got it. I wanted to make sure I understood what it related to.
Any other? Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the PowerPoint page 3, there's a parenthesis that I'm not sure I understand about Sharrows. I understand that people may not like them, but does that change your plans for implementation at all? I mean, in other words, those places where they are Sharrows, are they going to be greened?
Mr. Chair, Committee Member Green, sorry, Mrs. Chair. Committee Member Green, the discussion we had last time is we clarified with the group then is that we didn't feel like you were throwing out the Sharrow altogether. Still a valuable tool, but I think what you were hearing from the community that you were telling us is that the plan wasn't strong enough and the gap closures didn't have the higher quality, which are not Sharrows. But the plan is not, before you now, has not ditched all the Sharrows. Yes, they are green, and that is the plan for the remaining streets that we did not change to the higher quality.
Thank you.
Mr. Green, I did hear a member of the audience asking about a Sharrow. I know some people are new, so I just want to really quickly say that a Sharrow is a marking of a roadway. It's a Class 3 type of a bike route where bike riders and automobile drivers use the same lane, and they typically work best on lower volume and lower speed streets. So I just wanted to clarify that because I heard that question out there.
Thank
Okay,
you.
you had one more question?
The other question was that the timeline on PowerPoint 2 only envisions one, at least presumably only envisions one council meeting. And I would like to ask if there was any thought of before the second meeting to recycle the changes that the council might do back through the Planning Commission and this committee.
Madam Chair, Committee Member Green, absolutely not. That would be a pretty expensive and time-consuming process, and we do a very robust process. But every time we have a meeting, the folks in the audience have to take time out of their days and come to this, and there's a lot of people who care very much about this plan, and so we want to have the right amount of public process. And some people complain on both sides, but we would, for the sake of the council, we would only be it'll be to the council after this meeting. We won't be coming back to committees unless they directed us to, then we would.
Thank you.
Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in the Bicycle Master Plan on page 64 is this wonderful chart that puts checks by, has each project listed, and then there's a line which it tells you whether it does these different things: enhance safety for all users, close the gaps, improve existing, create east-west connections, better connections to school, enhance safety at intersections, and improve connections across 101. And that was not updated on the Micheltorena project. So I just, that puzzled me, and I put a question mark by it. So I was so glad to hear the answer that it was not updated yet.
And just so you all understand exactly what Committee Member Horn is saying, the Planning Commission caught the fact that we hadn't checked all the necessary boxes for that street because obviously it does the heavy lifting of the system and they would be checked. So, but we will edit that.
Okay, and the one other thing is that I thought I understood that, you can tell me if this is right, that of the appendices, that they're really only available online. Is that right? Like the things that were mentioned by the consultant.
Sure. So the appendices are available online. They're up on the Bike Master Plan website, and I'll just tell everyone what that is if you're new to the process. It's the standard city SantaBarbaraCA.gov. If you go to the city's website, all you need to do is put in a /BMP for Bicycle Master Plan, and that'll take you to the web page. On there is the appendix. All the appendices are up there. So I thought we sent an email out that gave all of your committee members the option to download both of those documents. So, and I have hard copies if you'd like one as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Hillary. One question on page 51 of the plan. I noticed it said in the goal section on the right in the little box, it said construct up to 5 of those projects by 2020. I guess my question would be, do we have to stop at 5? Or could that be construct at least 5 or 5? I'm just wondering, I hadn't noticed that before, written that way, but maybe I just didn't notice it before. And it was there.
Was that a question?
Yeah, what is the meaning of construct up to 5 by
Okay, so the answer to that question is, it's a measurement of success, and we want to be successful. So we will not stop at 5 if we have the funds to do 7 or 10.
Super. Great. Thanks. That's all.
Okay. Did you have any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. One quick question for staff. Appreciate having more quantifiable information about Micheltorena and parking impacts. And just one question, if you could maybe go back to the slide that shows parking adjacent to Micheltorena. What again is the number of parking spaces that are being considered to be converted to a bike lane, and what was the general occupancy of those spaces?
Committee Member France, that's a great question. So, in fact, if I was to redo this map, I would include that information. That's how good of a question that is. So, when we went out on a Friday afternoon and we counted all the cars between Castillo and Anacapa, there were 100 spaces and 94 of them occupied. I only found 6 spaces on a Friday afternoon where you could possibly fit a car into. Looking closer to just State Street, the number is about 85. And at various times of the day, I have found those 85 spaces around 70 to 85% occupied. So that's in that 60 to 70 cars parked on the road during the day. And I have some other hard numbers here. I can look into my sheet for other surveys, but those are the ones I remember.
Oh, no, thank you for that.
Okay, if there are no other questions from the committee, we will go ahead and go to public comment. If you haven't filled out a speaker slip and you wish to address the committee, please fill out a speaker slip over there and hand it in over there, and it'll be passed down to me. Each person gets 2 minutes to tell us what you think, and what else do I need to say? Help yourselves to coffee or water if you need it. We will get started, I guess. So first speaker slip is from Jennifer Larson.
So I am at the block, we have an office building that's located between State Street and Chapala. And my concern is that we have a large amount of disabled clients that come to see us. We have an attorney, 3 psychotherapists, senior living consultants, massage therapist in our building alone. We're right next door to an acupuncturist with other therapists, and on the other side, another large building with therapists. My disabled clients need to be able to pull up in a car and get out. They cannot, walk several blocks. And the problem is that there is no large parking structures that are for the public nearby. I mean, the nearest one, I believe, would be like 3.5 blocks down State Street. So that's a huge concern. It could be a financial hardship. It could cause us to lose business because it is no longer convenient for people to see us in our office. I think that it would make sense to move the bike lane onto Sola Street, 1 block down to the block that has 2 large parking lots on either side of that block and no immediate businesses. There are several businesses, doctors, psychotherapists, residents on the block that I'm at. And it just doesn't make any sense to me when you could just be moving it 1 block down and it wouldn't have the impact that it's going to have. The other concern I have is that the analysis that was done on the parking doesn't really take into account what that parking would look like around that area once you remove the parking spaces from those 4 blocks of Mitchell-Torrena. That's not taken into account. So those are my concerns, and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Dawn Longstreet, to be followed by Walter Larson.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to go fast. This is a great plan, the best I've seen in 2.5 decades. However, the Santa Barbara still lacks any east-west connectors. And for the west side, the only bicycle access over Highway 101 is the Mitchell-Torrena Street Bridge. The primary use of bicyclists there right now is somewhere in excess of 50% are professionals who work downtown. As Mr. Dayton has told you before, we have twice the density of bicycle users on the west side, and the biggest destination for all bicycle users is State Street. So this is the shortest, most direct route. This is also literally the only place we can put a safe route to school. A safe route to school, as I discovered when I was run down by a car 2 years ago, requires a Class 2 lane. You need to have a physical space between the automobile and the person on the bicycle, especially if they're a child. This is already a heavily used arterial. I apologize, I didn't get my electronic material to you till this morning, but I'll try to summarize it. I did a bike survey at peak hours a week and a half ago between 4 and 7 o'clock at night that showed Mitchell-Torrena supporting the use of 94 bicycle riders making 97 bicycle trips, and half of those were after dark. In terms of parking mitigation, which is going to be the real hot spot, I've suggested, and the Planning Commission also suggested, that staff start working to create a partnership to deal with the spaces. There are private spaces with public access in this area, a total of 130 spaces, and I know the gentleman that owns the medicine shop parking lot is already working in agreement with, I think it's the endoscopy lab, to share parking spaces, and this is part of the option. We there?
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's effective. Okay, Mr. Larson, followed by Jennifer McMillan.
Yeah, just to clarify, Jennifer Larson's my daughter. She has a office in the same building. We've owned this building since the 1980s. I do disability law, so virtually all of my clients are people with disabilities, and having to walk any distance would be a great hardship for them. This is an older neighborhood. There is not a lot of off-street parking. In my building, we have two spaces, and they're used up for people who rent. So there is no other parking there. And if people have to drive up and park in the bike lane and let out their clients or patients, it's going to be hazardous. The other thing is, I understand that there was some consideration of having this bike lane run up Sola Street after leaving Mitchell-Torena's overpass, going down the existing bike lane to Solar Street. That would be a lot less congested, would be a lot closer to the city parking lots, where businesses, clients, have a place to park in the city lot. There's nothing like that up on Mitchell-Torena. And as to how many spaces are vacant at any one time, all I can tell you is that during the business day, in that 100 block of West Mitchell-Torena Street, there are spaces available, but they rotate. Most of the people that come to the doctors and to me and to the therapist and so forth, they have an hour or less appointment, so it works out good for them. But if they had to walk a number of blocks, they would not be able to make it. So I thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Jennifer McMillan, followed by Jacqueline Fortini. I hope I didn't butcher that.
Hello. I apologize to everyone who heard me say this at the Planning Commission today, but I wasn't aware of the November 30th meeting because I live a whole block away from Mitchell-Torena Street. So I just heard from a neighbor who's here tonight that there was even an issue. So I know that the main issue is removal of parking spaces. It's a huge issue on the west side anyway, and regardless of how many spaces are there at any one time, if you go at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, they're all full. So, but that being the primary issue, and also wanting to create more Class 2 bike lanes, I thought of an alternative to Sola Street, which is the street I live on, to not have to give up any parking spaces, would be to make Mitchell-Torena a one-way street going eastbound, Arriaga a one-way street going westbound, and create a Class 2 bike lane in either direction or on each street, similar to what's on Bath and Castillo Street, and just have that between Castillo and State. And because there are two new traffic lights on Arriaga at, I think, Chapala and De La Vina, it would involve having to add parking or signals at Bath and Arriaga and at Castillo and Arriaga. But I'll tell you right now, right now during rush hour, Bath and Arriaga area is so congested they need a light there anyway. So that's kind of, I think, should happen anyway. But just by doing that, by making Class 2 bike paths on those two streets, would not impact traffic flow of automobiles, because a lot of those cars are going to the 101 on-ramp anyway at Arriaga. And it would create much more bicycle safety than having just the lanes that are squeezed into where parking spaces would be, and also doesn't remove any parking on any street.
Thank you. Jacqueline Fortini, followed by Terry Furukawa. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Jacqueline Fortini, and I represent Bulb in Town, which is a crowdfunding platform with a focus on local initiatives. Crowdfunding is the process of raising money from many individuals, as opposed to going to the bank or waiting for public funding, as the case may be. It seems to me that building the bike lanes on Mitchell-Torena would inconvenience a great number of people who live there or who have businesses there. And building it on Sola, because the financing would take so long, would inconvenience the bicyclists. I'm here to propose a third alternative, a compromise. This alternative would allow residents and businesses to keep their parking on Mitchell-Torena while giving bicyclists access to bike lanes on Sola, possibly within the year. Crowdfunding has enormous potential to bring people together, given the right participants and the right platform. As an example, earlier this year, Bolton Town raised 1 million euros to help to build and to secure future financing for a hydroelectric power plant in France. This money was raised by local residents. As well, this hydroelectricity will protect the environment in the Mid-Pyrenees for the near future and provide for affordable electricity for these same residents for years to come. I propose to you that crowdfunding could accomplish the same feat here. Contributions by the community for the community. Crowdfunding could raise the money needed to build the bike lanes on Sola without having to wait for the town to find the funding. I think this solution could make both sides happy, and I hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Furukawa, followed by Stephen Botts.
My name is Terry Furukawa. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I practiced on 22 Micheltorena for 30 years. There's well over 50 businesses in this first block of Micheltorena between State and Chapala alone. The proposed changes pose a direct threat to business owners and their employees in terms of livelihood issues. Parking's become increasingly difficult as I've watched the community grow, and with the successful business of South Coast Deli, it's really impacted parking. Our office, 22 West Micheltorena, is a professional building with 21 offices housing primarily psychotherapists with operating hours ranging from 8 to 8 p.m. evening hours. Typical appointments are from 45 to 60 minutes. Patient parking is dependent upon access to off-street parking on Micheltorena. So maximally at any given hour, 21 spaces are needed throughout the day. As largely professional services providers, the availability, of 90-minute turnover parking is essential for our practices. The proposed plan also removes the limited existing disabled parking, hindering access to services by the elderly and the physically disabled. The proposed plan looks logical and perhaps physically reasonable on paper. However, the adverse impact that it has on to our livelihood and the tax base to the city is broad, and small businesses may be forced to relocate. There's only been 7 working days since the November West Side open house where the business community first learned of the proposed plan to eliminate parking. The notification process from our standpoint seems deeply flawed. In the last 4 days, we've gathered 86 signatures from business owners in that area alone and their employees who are in opposition of the elimination of Mitchell Street public parking. I think it's essential that all parking on Micheltorena be preserved and that alternative bike routes be considered. The needs of the 6% cycling community needs to be counterbalanced with the needs of the business in finding workable solutions that can preserve existing parking. I thank you for the opportunity to express these concerns, and I'd be happy to make myself available to for a neighborhood walkthrough to familiarize you with our business community.
Thank you.
I have an appointment with Kathy Murillo for a walkthrough.
Thank you. Your time's up.
Thank you.
I have to be fair to everybody. So Stephen Botts, followed by David Campbell.
Hi there, I'm Steve Botts. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm a car driver. I'm concerned about the general population of people, including bike riders, pedestrians, as well as cars. The goal is to have the safest community we can possibly have. The streets are transportation corridors. They are narrow, and the space on those streets is exceedingly valuable. Bikes, cars, and pedestrians need to be able to safely use the streets. It's the highest use. It's a transportation corridor. It's not a parking corridor. I think that we need to use the space that we have, as valuable as it is, to move people and bikes and cars safely on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. David Campbell, followed by Barbara Hirsch.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak and for your support for a strong bike master plan. I was at the meeting a few weeks ago and understood that, I didn't stay to the end, but understood that the support was solid, and I appreciate that as a bike rider. I'm a longtime West Side resident, been there for 30 years. I'm a regular bike commuter. I ride Micheltorena in the wintertime when the sun is so low on Cliff that it's not safe. Cars, if you ever drive toward City College, the whole stretch is right there. You can't see a bike, and it's unsafe. So I support a safe bike lane on Cliff as well as Micheltorena. We owe it to the community members who ride, either out of necessity or by choice, a safe route to work and school and recreational use as well. Eve Sanford, the SB Bike Advocacy Associate, and I counted over 100 riders on Monday morning, November 23rd, between 6 and 8:30 on the corner of Mitchell-Terena and Castillo Street. The vast majority of those were people going to work. So I think also a strong bike master plan will be noticed by the drivers. If we see green lanes on State Street or committed bike lanes, I think drivers of cars will get the sense that, hey, Santa Barbara's a bike-friendly city and community, and I may start giving the bike riders the 3 feet that we're lawfully entitled to. And I just appreciate your time and listening, and thanks again.
Thank you. Barbara Hirsch, followed by Vernon, I'm sorry, I can't read your last name, McCaslin. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Hirsch. I'm a bike rider. It's my primary form of transportation. I live on the west side, and I ride on Mitchell-Terena every day. I'm mainly here to represent the hundreds of people who do yoga at the Santa Barbara Yoga Center, which is between State and Anacapa, and also the people who are less physically able who are taking yoga there. My co-owner was just at the UN. I have to take this moment to brag for a bit, teaching accessible yoga in Geneva at the UN, and that's what our center is going to become known for in the next few years. So we will have people who obviously need to be dropped off at least in front of the center, if not parking there. But that may not be a problem. I realize that block may not be going to the city council as having its parking removed. As far as the other side of the street goes, I strongly support making Sola one-way towards State and Arriaga one-way towards the freeway, just purely because of the density of Mitchell-Terena. It is by far the most dense street of those 3 streets. And so, you know, as much as I would love to have a very easy ride on Mitchell-Terena every day, I feel sorry for the residents and the businesses on Mitchell-Terena having the parking removed. Thank you very, very much for the Bike Master Plan.
Thank you. Vernon McCaslin, followed by Rebecca Goodman.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I have a business at 32 West Mitchell-Terena. That street's already a difficult one to get down. They're going to add another parking structure, not a parking structure, but another housing unit in our area just a few blocks down. That's going to increase the density of parking also. That street's already a problem, and you have a lot of handicapped people that are going to a lot of good services there, and now you're asking them to walk blocks just so that they can get in and get their treatments, and that's not fair. Also, I'm a general contractor, and where am I going to get a 4 by 14 by 16 foot beam when I can't park out somewhere to get that into the houses that have to be refurbished there? Those are the things that we have to look at. Convenience for everybody. And what it's come down to, from what I've noticed, is 2 parking stoplights at Sola. That's what the issue is. That's a far better corridor. It's wider. It has more parking area there. That's about all I can say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rebecca Goodman, followed by Carol Sipper.
I'm a psychologist. I share an office. I'm at the same address as Dr. Furukawa at 22 West Mitchell-Terena between State and Chapala. And I just want to reiterate what other people have said, that I think that the viability of our businesses depend on the viability of street parking. It's important for us business owners, and it's important for the people to whom we provide services. I'm hoping that you can picture, I'm sure you know this, but I hope you can picture what happens, what's been my experience and the experience of some of my clients is you drive to work, and some days you don't know if you're going to find a spot there or if you're going to drive around and circle around and go up this way, up that way until you find a spot. And I think that happens often enough that there's a lot of circling around to find a spot. I'm not sure how to reconcile that with some of the, I'm sure, good data that you found about the number of vacancies out there. You know, it's such as the dynamics of parking. I do think that that phenomenon of having to drive around and circle around to find a spot would jeopardize our businesses to the point of possibly killing them or forcing us to relocate. For those people who have disabilities and have trouble walking or elderly and are just going for having to leave work, for example, and allow enough time for their 1-hour session before they come back. Thanks.
Thank you. Carol Sipper, followed by Bernard Unterman.
Hi, my name is Carol Sipper, and I live at 12 West Micheltorena, and we have a business at 10 West. We've lived there for 30 years. My husband and I have a rare book business at 10 West Micheltorena. We live in the back, and when we moved in, there was no parking except a small driveway, so we got permits to park on the street, plus a visitor's pass. So I'm wondering now if this does go through, where we'll park. I mean, will you allow more spaces in our grouping there? It's D spaces, and where we will park our car if and when these spaces are taken away. And obviously, this will be an inconvenience for us, not only for ourselves as residents, but for the people that come to our office. Hearing these people talk, my neighbors, I'm thinking it's not going to be as much of an inconvenience for us as it will be for them. I see, there's a lot of people here with a lot of, different needs. And one other thing, we used to be able to park across the street at the Med Center and that whole parking lot. They were very free about letting us park for years. Since we moved in, everybody could park over there, and just recently, within the last 2 or 3 months, they've clamped down on that, which I understand because they want it for their businesses and that. But that does impact us, even though that wasn't legal parking for us. We used it, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Bernard Unterman, followed by Cameron Gray.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. First of all, I've been carless by choice for 7 years. I don't own a car. I only ride bicycle and I only walk. I'm here on behalf of the block of Micheltorena between State and Chapala. There are 53 businesses and private practices on that block, many of them long-standing businesses and private practices, most of them servicing people who are elderly or injured or unable to walk the extra blocks. If you can imagine, I'm sure you know what the block is like. 389 throughout the day. Our block alone requires 389 parking spaces for the 53 businesses and private practices on that one block alone. There are 53. And so that's 389 that our block requires throughout the day. Imagine the equivalent block on Sola between State and Chapala. They don't require any on-street parking. You have the Arlington parking lot. You have the bankruptcy court, which has its own parking lot. The software building on the corner of Sola and Chapala, which has its own parking lot. They don't have walk-ins. They do all their business online. That block doesn't require any on-street parking. Our block, Micheltorena between State and Chapala, requires 389 spots per day. And as a bike rider, people who have babies, they notice babies everywhere. I'm a bike rider. I see bikes. Whenever I see a bike, I take note. I have a garden in front of my office. The numbers of bikes that people have said per day pass by is greatly inflated.
Thank you.
I invite you to come by and count for yourselves.
Thank you. Cameron Gray, followed by David Singh.
Committee members, good evening. My name is Cameron Gray, speaking on behalf of Community Environmental Council. Our organization is very pleased with this revised version of the Bicycle Master Plan update, and we want to thank city staff and consultants for all the work they've done on this plan, as well as everyone who has helped guide the plan's development up to this point. It's worth noting that right now in Paris, there are currently climate negotiations happening. And the Bicycle Master Plan before us tonight will provide a path to reducing our reliance on automobiles in Santa Barbara and reducing greenhouse gas emissions locally. It's also worth noting that there's a trend of decreasing automobile ownership among millennials. Now, I know there are a lot of upset businesses in the room tonight, and I would encourage the city to engage with them so they can realize the benefits that the bike lanes may present by installing bicycle parking and becoming bicycle-friendly businesses. With that being said, I just want to once again thank everyone for their work on this plan and make it clear that we strongly support the current version of the Bicycle Master Plan update. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Singh, followed by Joey J.L.
Hi, I'm David Singh, and I own La Bamba Market, which in 2 weeks' time will be 100 years old, making it the oldest continuously run convenience store in the nation.
Wow.
That being said, if parking has to be removed from La Bamba, you will kill that store. If you look at the way traffic flows, any other suggestions of having customers park on Bath Street, like Don Longstreet suggested, will absolutely not work. In the store, I have right here internet access on all over 9 cameras, 2 cameras pointing out at Mitchell-Torina and 1 at Bath. I strongly suggest to you all that your statistics are incorrect. Firstly, as you pointed out yourself, that the available parking on all those 1 Tuesday evening and 3 continuous days staggered over a period staggered over 4 periods is so incorrect. What we could do is maybe I'll give you internet access to my cameras and count the number of cyclists that pass on Mitchell-Torina and the number of available parkings. And also remember that while we have so many homes here, a lot of people have roommates and stuff like that, and people have 2 cars. The number of cars that's needed, that needs parking is really huge. That being said, of course, bike lanes are important. We do have alternatives, but if something has to be thought about Mitchell-Torina, why not a staggered time where you would allow parking for businesses and, of course, taking care of the cyclists? Again, in order for you all to make a true determination, I strongly suggest you all look at real hard facts, not just a small period of time, and because this is such an important decision. It impacts a lot of people who's been there for decades. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Joey J.L.,
It's
followed
Joey.
by Gabriella Johnson.
Thank you. My name is Joey Juhas Lukomsky. Basically, I just wanted to say a couple things since this is the Transportation and Circulation Committee. My girlfriend just started working at a preschool in San Roque, and so I wanted her to, I live on the west side, we live on the west side, I wanted her to ride her bike to work, and the options are Creo Underpass, Mitchell-Torina, Mission, or Las Positas. So 3 out of 4 of those are a little too dangerous for a relatively new bike commuter. So then we decided to go across the Mitchell-Torina Bridge to get to Bath Street to head up that way. And even, it's just kind of a tease that those bike lanes are there on that bridge, and then they just abruptly stop, and even that 1 block between Castillo and Bath, where we would then go left, it really pinches, and it gets very tight, and she's not comfortable with that, so instead she's driving to work, and that's just 1 more car on the road between 8 and 9 in the morning, Monday through Friday. Secondly, I just want to comment on what I seem to see as kind of an underrepresented community, those living maybe between San Andres and the highway. SP Bike did an event on Mitchell-Torina Street where we surveyed some bike riders. A majority of them were Spanish speakers. A lot of them, the bike was the only way for them to get around, get to work. And I urge you to consider them in this decision and send this plan forward to council as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriella Johnson, followed by Shine Ling.
Too much stuff in my hands. Thank you for the opportunity for the community to speak about this issue. Obviously, I'm a resident on Mitchell Traina as well. I live in the 100 block. I just want to say right off, I don't think it's fair to think the residents who live on Mitchell Traina don't support a safe corridor for biking. We really think this is a great idea. However, it shouldn't come down to an either or. There's got to be some sort of balance, give and take on both sides. And I spoke to some of the residents after the meeting this afternoon, and this idea about a peak hour bike lane might be an option. It would affect some of the businesses, but shorten what would be affected as opposed to no parking. Anapamu is another option. There's already 2 stoplights there. If you're worried about having to put in stoplights on Sola, well, Anapamu has those. Nobody's really talked about that. And if the biking community is going to State Street, where does Anapamu put you? Right in the middle of it. So if that's really demographic going downtown, that's another option. I just think it shouldn't come down to an either or. I think there's a balance here. I work in conservation. I support CEC, and I support, mitigating climate change and all of that. But I think we do need to consider other options, and it shouldn't just be a black and white either or too bad. Speaking as a resident, there's issues with safety, having to take things into my house. My elderly neighbors have to carry things. A lot of the handicapped individuals who go to the businesses nearby, I feel for them. Myself, I can deal with it. I'll find a way. But I think this community, there's some things that have changed around the area as well for night parking. It's not as safe as it used to be. I lived there 20 years now, and there's some iffy stuff going on at night. And I think La Bamba Market could attest to some of the stuff that's changed over the past years with his business as well. So there's a safety issue for the residents in the evenings. So if we could park near our house in the evenings, that would, help alleviate some of that. So I just look to you to kind of think about finding a balance and an equilibrium, not making it an either or. So appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Shine Ling, followed by Kim Stanley.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. I'm a city planner in private practice, and I've been a resident of West Downtown for over 10 years. And I want to commend the staff and the city for putting together an excellent bike plan. And my comments I'm going to highlight now, which I did put in writing earlier to you today, to help make this good plan an even better one. The first has to do with data and getting a good before and after picture of road conditions before you put a project in and after. I'm glad that the plan has evaluation as a priority. I would like to see the city commit resources and a hard policy to ongoing evaluation of projects, especially in the before and after of each implementation. And my second comment is more of a big picture comment about the policies. They're excellent policies, safety, mobility for all users. And so I would encourage the committee and the city to look at all the projects on its list with that lens in mind for looking towards a community-wide benefit. And so in looking at the Mitchell-Traina question, I understand that there's serious concerns with regards to parking, but I would also want to speak for the entire community's needs as a whole for transportation and encourage you to look at safety and mobility, these excellent policies that you have at the foundation of your BMP. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kim Stanley, followed by Eve Sanford.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. I'd like to voice my support in creating bike lanes on Mitchell-Traina Street. I, too, would prefer lanes on Sola so that so many people wouldn't be displaced. However, it's impossible to have those lanes on Sola due to engineering problems, 15 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Therefore, Mitchell-Traina is the connecting street for West Side residents to get downtown. It's the only east-west option of giving families a safe route to the downtown area, my family being one of them. I have a 9 and a 12-year-old, and there are I just don't feel safe with those kids. I can do it, but I don't feel safe getting my kids downtown on bikes. I would also encourage the proposed improvements for the Foothill route near Peabody School be moved ahead in the timeline. The current plan states that the greenback sharrows and increased signage begin implementation by 2025. 9 years is a really long time for a school zone to wait for minor improvements like paint and signage. Implementation by 2020 even seems so long to wait. Finally, nodding to the important climate summit in Paris, let's start supporting and encouraging citizens to use active transportation for so many reasons. We have to figure out ways to get people out of their cars and onto their feet and bicycles. Let's think globally and act locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Eve Sanford, followed by Mike Suding. And Mike is the last speaker slip I have, so if anyone else wants to speak, please fill out a slip and hand it in.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to thank Shannon and our city staff for their excellent work on this bike plan. I think it is a document that will be a blueprint for improved transportation for everyone in our city through well-connected bike networks that network that will have exponential benefits on investments that we've already made as a city through reduced congestion and through reducing demand for car parking. I'd like to draw attention to some census statistics. On the west side, between 6.6 and 10.4% of residents ride a bike to work. That's not taking into account residents on the Mesa, residents in other parts of the city that cross Mitchell-Torrena. That's also not taking into account additional trips for errands and shopping and patronizing our downtown businesses, utilizing our downtown businesses. I'd like to draw your attention to the bike facility matrix that Hillary touched on earlier. I think it does a really good job of enumerating the benefits that we're working to achieve through this bike plan. And I'll touch on how Mitchell-Torrena meets some of these. The first one, enhancing safety for all road users. Without a doubt, this project will do that through high-quality infrastructure that will serve users from 8 to 80. Closing gaps in the network, Mitchell-Torrena and the 101 freeway poses an obvious gap in our bike network and a detriment to our cycling system. Improving existing facilities. This has been in the bike plan since 1998 because it's an obvious improvement that needs to be made, and it makes sense. Of creating east-west connections, improving connections across the 101 freeway. It does both of those. Better connections to schools. It connects to Harding, Notre Dame, and not to mention a number of high school students that use it to get to Santa Barbara High School when they're coming from the other parts of the city. And enhance safety at intersections. There have been 38 bike-involved collisions on the Mitchell-Torrena corridor in the past 7 years. So definitely this bike lane would serve people. Last but not least, I'd like to say,
Sorry, thank you.
That's fine.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Mike Suding.
Hi, my name's Mike Suding, and I've lived in Santa Barbara for 50 years. And I'm old enough to remember when Mission Street had parking on it. And I just wanted to say, I think it's inevitable, unfortunately, that, streets have to be consumed by transportation, but you can park lots of places. You can only ride or drive, on streets. So I think it's an unfortunate thing. I also like to suggest that we use policies and set thresholds for, a certain amount of bike, car travel, parking that are more objective on ways to, design and improve the city as opposed to the ad hoc reactionary method. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the committee? Seeing none, let's bring it back for discussion. Who wants to start? Ed?
I'll go first. First off, I guess I'd like to start with looking back on the bike master plan, and obviously with a focus on the discussion that we're having tonight about Mitchell-Torrena. And I think it's an unfortunate spot that, in fact, was pointed out well at the Planning Commission, that the nature of this recommendation, in fact, I think one of the planning commissioners is here who pointed this out, is it would have been great had we been able to have this conversation much earlier on in the bike master plan conversation. I think the reality is this route has been on the books since the bike master plan that preceded this 17 years ago, the 1998 Bike Master Plan. So Mitchell-Torena to have a bike route. But that plan didn't actually have a lot of action behind it, and it just kind of, a lot of those projects that were more challenging, as Mr. Dayton has said, well, all of the easy stuff has been done. And what remains is the really hard choices and hard trade-offs, where we have to look at backwards and forwards and upside down how we can deliver people from one route to another. And I think that's the conversation that we're having tonight. I attended the meeting the neighborhood meeting on the 30th, just to observe. I think that, in fact, as Planning Commissioner Jordan pointed out, throughout this process, one of the things that we need to do as appointees on committees making recommendations to council is make ourselves painfully aware of every impact to anyone affected by the projects that we deliberate and make recommendations on. Mitchell-Torena is one of those really hard projects, and that's what we're having right now. It really helps to have the numbers. These numbers, I think it's been well said that if you really want great parking numbers, it's different times, different seasons, but at least we are not just in the dark. These numbers are not perfect, but we have something. I think that you can't tell someone, and I think it's not just Mitchell-Torena. It's also a couple blocks on Coda. It's also a couple blocks on Rancheria. I think there's another parking removal somewhere. In fact, there's one that I'd like to see that did not make it to the plan on the block on San Andreas crossing Carrillo, because I think that's a particularly treacherous crossing that is unsafe in its current condition. I think there's just something under just under 200 parking space removals being considered in this plan, and half of it is affecting a lot of folks here in this room. And I think that the challenge is, in terms of, I think there's two challenges that we need to look at. One is overall through the system. And I think that the reality overall through the system, if the Bike Master Plan is successful, overall in neighborhoods like the West Side, there's actually going to be some relief on on-street parking pressure. Things like more people biking because we finally have connected the routes that we lacked the skills or tools or intestinal fortitude to do over the last 15 years are going to allow more people to choose to bike and more households like mine to convert from being a two-car household to being a one-car household. And that's a steady, slow demographic shift. So overall, throughout the network, I think we're going to see a lot of net positive on parking as a result of the Bike Master Plan. I think other things can help, like car share. I think that with this specific instance and in other areas as well, we need residential parking permit programs in places where they've been maybe considered but haven't happened, because residents with real needs need to have access close by. Those who are spilling over need to not impact that parking as much. I live on Figueroa Street, and there's a residential parking permit program. And parking is tight, but it makes it slightly better. There's a lot of different tools, but at the end of the day, those tools are not going to alleviate one-to-one citizens living on routes that are on gaps in the bikeway network, where the overall evaluation may fall on this is what we need to do. So how do we address that? We need to look at everything that we have in terms of local tools. First off, definitely residential parking permit program. When we look at the parking around the area, sorry if that's really loud, there's kind of two things, and we need to be really shrewd about our parking needs and how we can help address those. And not just with trends over time, but I mean like very, very quickly. In any proposal, be it SOLA or Anapamu or what have you, at least one block that is heavily, densely, residentially packed and a lot of residents, at least one block would be impacted. The full proposal, we're looking at 4. I think that as part of observing conversations with residents, because this is the commons, it's the street, I think one of the realities, it's not every case, but one of the realities that impacts everybody else is that there is abuse of the system. There are residencies that park a lot of cars, that those few sort of outliers, but that do impact the system, might be less with the residential parking permit program. There are efforts like quantifying the parking impact. I know in Old Town Goleta, one of the studies that they did was to look at, with the old redevelopment agency, and I don't know that the city can do this, but I think the city can do things like this on a smaller scale to really help free up parking. If we're looking at 85 spaces that are heavily used, at what you said, Mr. Brown, like 85%, I think there's two realities. One is probably a lot of customers are already parking on side streets. I think that there is a lot of disability need. I think we need to look with kind of paramount priority is handicap accessibility parking and focusing on, if there are impacts, finding potential solutions for that. And considering how already impacted this area is, one, I think a lot of this parking is already on other side streets, and two, I think that within this neighborhood, like in Old Town Goleta, it's worth looking at all of the parking available off-street and carefully analyzing, what lots are already sharing through arrangements and contracts with other commercial parties. Like it sounds like at least one of these parking lot owners is already doing. I think the city needs to encourage that. I think the city needs to do everything it can to mitigate impact. And I think one of the conversations that unfortunately we're not having tonight, which is why I belabor the point that it would have been great to talk about this in more detail throughout more of the meetings that have built up to tonight, is I think that in the case of Mitchell-Torrena, I think just about every possible alternative, save for having drones pick people up and drop them off 4 blocks later, has been analyzed to death. And I think that the reality is the second best alternative is at the which is Sola Street, is at the earliest 10 to 15 years out. So that's a lot of comments. I don't want to overwhelm people, but I just want to end with this is pretty exhaustive stuff, and it's not fun in any way, shape, or form. At the end of the day, the challenge that we have is to prioritize the overall system. And I think in these 4 blocks, there's so much value to completing the bike network that, especially with the city following up and very diligently looking to help address the needs, first of handicap parking, and second, commercial and residential needs, which are different and are going to need different tools. I think that the Mitchell-Torrena should remain in the plan, and I think part of the plan should be, and part of that effort should be every effort to alleviate the impact to residents and businesses.
Thank you. Howard.
Good evening, Madam Chair again, and staff. It is a great result that we've had so far. There's some fine-tuning. I think both the Planning Commission and this committee asked very strongly in the July meeting, and which you complied with in the draft, with ranking the projects. I'm a little concerned that Mitchell-Torrena is number 8 on the list. I see some others that I'd like to somehow challenge, at least number 5, number 6, number 10, bike boulevards. I don't think they're as important as Mitchell-Torrena. I guess I'd like to somehow have the thought come out to the council that the staff still has to go through the CIP, the budgeting process for capital improvements, and that's another chance to examine some of these, except for Mitchell-Torrena, which is just paint. Paint doesn't fit in a fixed asset. So you could perhaps move that further up without impacting the funding process. I mean, a little bit. The projects that I identified, Ortega and Foothill, also, I think, are suspect in terms of priorities. We're going to be faced in a few years, maybe longer than any of us would like, with 101 being expanded to 3 lanes. That's going to increase the traffic flow into town from the south. I don't think it's really going to affect many of the bike route paths, but we should at least be aware of that when we talk about Arriagega, because that is an exit ramp from 101 in addition to being an entrance ramp. Mitchell-Torrena, I guess a couple questions for staff. It's kind of minute, but what's the width of the street in the narrowest part? What's the ideal driving lane? And is there room for both a buffered and bike lane if we take out the parking?
Committee Member Green, the Mitchell-Torrena width is fairly consistently 36 feet. It is one of our narrowest streets. So when you look at our standard parking lane width, it's about 8 feet. And you multiply that times 2, that's 16 feet, and then you got 10-foot travel lanes, 2 of those. So that takes up the lanes. Our standard, our California Vehicle Code required standard for a bike lane, if we're going to designate in a plan and call it a bike lane, tell the public it's a bike lane, is 5 feet wide. So you know, the potential to put a small buffer may exist. We haven't done the detailed planning and analysis there, but right now we're thinking if we paint a Class 2 lane and we have a travel lane there, those travel lanes, you know, we're looking at other parts of town where the travel lanes could be 9, 10, 11 feet wide. So we're looking at every possible option, but we're not in the detailed design phase yet. So that's the critical thing to remember.
Thank you. And I'd like to further ask if there is maybe consensus of the panel here, the committee, that the ranking somehow, it's good, but that it be indicated as a little bit more flexibility, that it comes back in the CIP, again, the capital investment plan, so that the general phases that are in the last pages perhaps are provided, but the ranking on page 62 and 63, don't call it rank, just call it line item number. So I think that there's opportunity over time to massage the sequence of the projects, and I think you should allow yourself that flexibility.
We definitely have the flexibility. The prioritization doesn't, in other words, if one's ready to go right away, like you mentioned, the parking removal could be done tomorrow. If council says, agrees to whatever parking removal they agree to, that's a paint crew going out with a striper and can be done right away. So that may not be reflected on the prioritization, and you're welcome to adjust it however you want. But that is, in fact, what can and will happen after that decision.
Lastly, I'd like to, since I've talked about capital improvement program several times, I actually got the detail sheets for the traffic and engineering department's plans, and a number of these projects are already in the plan between now and 2020. It's obviously the capital hasn't been approved that far out, but at least the insight exists in this plan. So I suggest that more and better on this. A few of them aren't included, and I'll give that list to you all later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hillary.
So I'm pleased we're at this point. And I want to thank both consultant who's here and those who stayed back. Good to see you all again. And to staff, obviously, there's been a tremendous amount of work. And I think, as we've seen with the last few public outreach with the East Side Plan and a few other things, the city, I think, really has now a knack for doing community engagement on major things like this. So I'm really, really pleased to see how this went, and I think it can serve as a model for other cities to use this kind of process. So thanks for all your work. You know, I support the plan. Obviously, the biggest heartburn is coming on Mitchell-Terena. I agree that it's difficult. It's hard. None of this was going to be easy, except maybe some green paint. But when you look at the spine of our city and the structure of the city and how, for better or for worse, we have a freeway running through the middle of our town, there have to be safe and reasonable ways to get people from one side of the freeway to the other. You know, we've discussed in other meetings and some tonight why some of the other crossings are lacking, many of which we just don't have enough space in the world to make bicyclists and motorists feel safe getting through underpasses and things like that. Mitchell-Terena, we have a phenomenal bridge, and it's, as of now, a bridge to nowhere. If you're on a bike. Some people traverse it. I definitely don't feel safe doing that in the downtown core. I think that this one piece, while I understand the impact on the businesses, I think that there are ways to get creative for those businesses, connect folks with hopefully traffic solutions at SB-CAG to talk. Obviously, you're probably not going to pitch your clients on, hey, take a bus or take a bike or whatever. You can encourage that. But I think for a lot of folks, encouraging employees to use alternatives and not do the 90-minute shuffle or not do the, not bring their car to that area if they're living somewhere else. I know my office is downtown. We have about 6 people that work there. We only have 2 parking spaces, and we just hash it out every week. Who is really, really, really going to need that that space due to work? And we work it out, and it happens. So it is doable. So for those spaces that maybe you have 1 or 2 designated to your business off street, working it out that way, and then also deciding ways to make it work wherever your employees are parking, so that might free up some options for people who are coming from out of the area for a quick trip. It is, I think, hopefully a possibility. I don't know what all the other ramifications would be, but maybe expanding the residential parking program in that area to a few more blocks. And also maybe if the big concern is for people visiting the area who need disabled parking, maybe putting 1 or 2 more of those on some of the close side streets, taking spots that will remain but switching them to blue instead of their current treatment. And then, yeah, sort of reminding ourselves, and I watched the Planning Commission meeting and really appreciated what Commissioner Schwartz had to say about this being public right-of-way, and we sort of forget that it is sometimes. We forget about sidewalks sometimes too, but it is public right-of-way, and I appreciate what the gentleman said about streets. You can park in several different places, but streets are for traveling, and ultimately that's what has to win out, and it can't always just be traveling for cars, traveling and parking for cars, but I think this would be a really, really great opportunity to improve circulation for bicyclists in the city, in addition to all the other wonderful things in the plan. So I appreciate people coming out. It's really useful to hear your feedback. It's not surprising feedback to me, even though you had sort of a shorter amount of time to give it. But I think all in all, it's going to have come out as a benefit to our community. So I would support moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Susan.
Well, I have been listening to everybody in several meetings now, and lots of comments from the public, and thinking about it, and I guess on Micheltorena, I'll just say first, it's not possible to make everybody happy, especially now that expectations of bicyclists, present and future, expectations are high now because of this plan and all the thinking that's been gone into it. And on the side of the residents who will be negatively impacted, their fear is really high because of this issue. It's become a crisis for many of them. So, both sides pay taxes. Everybody wants to prevent injuries and deaths from traffic collisions. And in my view, there is an alternative route available, which is SOLA. And if time is the big barrier there, I think that there can be, I think with a lot of pressure, continuing to make that a priority, that maybe it's possible to make that a much shorter time frame of happening. And my problem is that literally hundreds of people, residents and clients and people that use that neighborhood will be affected and negatively and some severely. So I cannot approve the entire plan as it is, but I love the rest of the plan. It's terrific work by the staff, and I'm thrilled to see, in looking at the whole plan, thrilled to see that programs, education and enforcement funding for those things, especially glad to see the enhanced police enforcement money for that. So it's great to see that, and some exceptional things like that. So thanks for the terrific work, but I can't vote for complete approval. I would approve everything with the amendment of changing the Micheltorena route.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Excuse me. Well, I will say the same thing I think everyone else has said, is thanks for the work. It's a tremendous, tremendous project. I think that's very important to note. I've lived in Santa Barbara about, 45 years, so I'm not, I've been down Micheltorena Street many times. And what strikes me is that from the comments tonight, I think the opportunity to be creative and flexible is really here. There are many places in our city where there's very limited parking, and some places have had to resort to hiring people who sit and watch and say, there's one spot for this business, one spot for this business, and they're all marked. I mean, we see that all over Santa Barbara. There's a lot right on the corner where the medicine shop is, and I've done business on that corner quite a bit. There's a lot of parking behind the endoscopy center where Walter Claudio, Darren John, where Darren John's studio is. There's parking that's all tucked back in there. And all of that parking probably could be earmarked. I think a lot of it is. But I'm just saying that I don't know how much the city can be involved in that, but sort of a public-private partnership to better manage the parking that's available off-street right on that corner. And there's a third little lot, if I'm not mistaken, on the corner of State and Mitchell-Terrain, a little business across the street from the empty drugstore, and Howard's nodding. So I'm thinking there's 3 private parking lots that might be well utilized by the 51 businesses in that block. Possibly if the city could enforce putting 2 or 3 handicap spots even in those lots. I don't know what the laws are about that, but it seems that it would be worth it to do whatever the city could to create accessible parking for those folks and create a bicycle corridor. And there's enough off-street parking in a reasonable distance that I think should be able to be made available. So I really go along with a lot of the people that said, let's get creative and let's look at solutions, and it's not an all or nothing type of a situation. And in fact, the people who work in those buildings might have better access for their people. I've had to park on Mitchell-Terrain to go into the businesses along there, and you take your life in your hands when you parallel park there and have to run out of your car because the cars are whizzing by so fast. So I think we got to put our creative hats on. So that's my thoughts.
Okay, I'm not going to repeat everything that everybody else said, but also, I will add my thanks for all the hard work that you guys have put into this plan. It is really very impressive. I too it's a hard decision. It's definitely a hard thing to know that this is going to that the Mitchell-Terrain parking removal will be a hardship for a lot of people. But I too come down on the side of feeling that streets are for transportation. This plan is a plan to improve mobility for everyone in Santa Barbara. And that as both Hillary and Kathleen suggested, I think that we can work cooperatively with the business owners, property owners, to try to help mitigate some of the parking removal. I'm not saying it's possible, but we can certainly give it our best shot. So I'll be supporting, recommending approval of the plan to council as well. And I don't think I need to reiterate anything else that you all have said, but I would entertain a motion.
I would move. Were you going to say something? No? Sorry? Okay. Madam Chair, I would move that we forward the bicycle master plan as is to the city council for approval, for adoption.
Okay. Motion, is there a second?
I second.
Amendment?
Howard?
I'd like to amend the motion, hopefully as a friendly motion, that we point out to the city council that our recommendation comes after strong deliberation on the Mitchell-Terrain problem, and that we ask that they reconsider their earlier direction to staff, because it's an important corridor. Not all those words.
I would say that's not necessary in a motion, and staff can pass that along. So it's not, that doesn't actually change anything, but.
Withdrawn then.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Kathleen.
I'm sorry, I have one more question too before we vote. I want to be sure that going forward from the vote, that there is a statement made that I think it's very important to consider the neighborhood parking, the woman who left who said she's going to lose her one special space that she's had on the block. I think that those people really need to have it addressed, and that the issue of handicap parking be addressed somehow in that one business block.
So
I don't know how those are forwarded.
Chair Bosch and members of the committee, we heard a very similar vein from the Planning Commission on alleviating the impacts. I'm just going to give you the list of the tools that I've written down and actually that your committee has added to. So the full list of tools, if Mitchell Terrena is approved by the city council, look at decreasing red curb lengths throughout the area, look at car share implementation in the neighborhood, look at private lot usage where possible and public-private partnerships for off-street parking, designating loading zones, especially those for folks with disabilities, enlist traffic solutions to work with employers to develop sustainable commutes for employees, and consider residential parking permit tools. So that's my exhaustive list. And again, if this is something that is eventually approved, we will use all of those.
I just have one more that we talked about internally since David Singh made the comment about La Bamba Market, and there is an opportunity on Bath Street to look at, there's a right turn lane there now with red against the store, and we could look at putting parking there as well with this plan. So it's just another thing. And, you know, I think more creativity is going to also come up as if in fact this moves forward. I mean, we don't know what council's going to do, but if in fact they did go this way, there's going to be more creative solutions that we can come up with as staff, as then turning our attention to those type of solutions and away from just the analysis.
Great. Okay. Did you have a comment, Ed?
If I could just add one item of discussion on the item. I really appreciate hearing that quantification, both of the Planning Commission and also the suggestions today. The only other thing that I would suggest is I really appreciate all the work that staff has done, and I know a great time investment for quantification of the parking. And one thing I'd really love to see, and you know, having read through these comments earlier, I was struck one of the offices on in one of the affected blocks, Vitamin Angels. We have 5 letters. One of them, don't do it. 4 of them, please do it. And I think there is some mobility benefit, and I think it's worth considering. You know, this is a trade-off. There are impacts that are detrimental, and there are also impacts that are a positive. And in terms of the car share concept, and in terms of the different things that you all will be looking into, as much as possible, obviously it's an inaccurate, you know, it's not an exact science, but as much as possible to continue the good work that you all are doing to try to quantify the impacts so we can, and council can best understand the decisions that they'll be making. But with that, yes, I support the motion on the floor.
Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
1 opposed. Okay. Next item on our agenda is the Measure A Cycle 3 grant applications.
Would I have Jessica Grant come up and give that presentation for consideration?
I think best it could. Yeah. Bummer. No, there's like so many Christmas, like right now, there's like so many events. Yeah.
You good? All right.
No.
How long is this one going to take? I'm guessing it's kind of quick.
Quick. Well, yes.
So yes, let's skip the break and just
Jessica Grant,
go on.
City of Santa Barbara Public Works Department. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm here to talk about the Measure A Cycle 3. I'm going to pause for a second. Is it good? Okay. Just want to make sure the microphone. Yes.
Okay, so the purpose of the meeting tonight is to review the 7 projects the city intends to submit for Measure A grant applications to the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments in December of 2015 and in January of 2015. So, as you remember, the Measure A is a sales tax measure approved by Santa Barbara County voters in 2008. And so Measure A funding in South County has 2 grant programs. And the programs are the Regional Bike and Ped program and then the Safe Routes to School program. And as far as in this program, a local jurisdiction in the South County can apply up to 4 grant applications. And there is approximately, I'll go over 1.7 million available in the bike pedestrian program, and then about another 1.7 million available in the Safe Routes to School program. So tonight, I wanted to go over the 4 projects that we intend to submit grant applications for the bicycle and pedestrian projects. These are due in December, actually, I believe next week. What the projects are, there's 4, and the first one is the Green Lane route and intersection markings for the new bicycle master plan spine connections. The second project is downtown bike corrals. The third is Mission Street access ramps. And the fourth is Hollister sidewalk. And for our recommended projects for Safe Routes to School program are the Old Coast Highway sidewalk and the North Lecumbre sidewalk and enhancements project and West Side access ramps, specifically along Sunset Avenue. I will probably spend under a minute explaining each one, if that's all right. Yes, okay.
Just, when do you want questions? At the end or
let me just,
after each?
Yeah, let me run through
You might answer them.
each of them, and then we'll take questions at the end. So the first one, and the preceding item was on the bicycle master plan. One of the items that we heard from the community as far as takeaways is to enhance existing safety of intersections and enhance mobility for all users. And this project that we would submit a grant application would focus on doing green lane routes along Lower State Street, approximately from Mission to Cabrillo, and then along Coda and Haley Streets. And when I talk about the bicycle master plan has in the program list of projects is for full green lanes of our spine network. What we're proposing to do with the Measure A grant application is sort of a baby step into that. And really it's focusing on the intersection treatments where there's the most conflict points. I think you saw in the earlier presentation, just our city collision data records. And so the green purpose of the green pavement is just to provide heightened awareness of the conflict points. So when vehicles are turning, making their right hand, going into the right-hand turn lane, they know that when they're crossing the bicycle lane, and vice versa, that for bicyclists, when they're traveling in the bicycle lane and they see the right-hand turn lane coming up, they know to expect cars that are going to be turning. And then there's also let's see if I can get the mouse to work. And then this is another picture of what it would be green skips through an intersection. So to help bicyclists best position themselves when they're continuing to travel through the intersection back into the bike lane of where they should position themselves in the roadway. Oops. got a duplicate picture in there. But this is for the second project is for downtown bike corrals. What we're proposing for the grant application is to fund about 5 more bike corrals. This was the original first bicycle corral in the city of Santa Barbara. And so far since the installation, I think you may have heard Peter Brown's presentation recently about the success of the bicycle corral. And so we're getting a lot of calls on, when can we get my bicycle corral? And so we'd like to continue to fund some of those requests. And it doesn't always include the removal of on-street parking. In some cases, like the one that we installed next to Figueroa Brewing Company in the Funk Zone, that was adjacent to existing red curb. Mission Street access ramps is the third project of the Petted Bike program. And this is the proposal for about 9 access ramps along this corridor ranging between Anacapa and Garden Streets. And it is in the vicinity of Roosevelt Elementary and Old Mission Santa Barbara. The closest transit stop is on State and Mission. And so if somebody was using transit to get to Old Mission, that's this could be one of the corridors for them to go. And this is an example of what an access ramp looks like. Sometimes we say access ramps or curb cuts. And it's just to help the most vulnerable users in our community, and that's people with disabilities or elderly. Sometimes a lot of the existing curbs are really hard to navigate, and so it helps with ease. And of course, moms with strollers, this is also a tremendous help. And this is, I show this picture, but you can't do this in a wheelchair to navigate a curb. And so what somebody in a wheelchair has to do is to find wherever the last driveway was and go into the street until they can navigate and find the next driveway. The fourth project is Hollister Avenue sidewalk. This is a grant application that we had tried a couple of cycles ago with Measure A, but we're trying again. And maybe this time it's a little bit more ripe for the proposal. But let's see, area in blue is where we're proposing to do the sidewalk infill. And so this is city of the airport, and this is the intersection of Fairview and Hollister, Twin Lakes Golf Course. Of course, this is Old Town Goleta. And this highlighted in green is a project out of Airport Enterprise Funds that they're looking to do sidewalk infill associated with some of their upcoming development that they see happening in the next couple years. And then in yellow, and I didn't note the city boundaries here, but once you get right about here, you're in the city of Goleta. But this is a future site for a Marriott hotel, and a part of their public improvements is to install sidewalk. So bottom line with these, this seems to be a good time to try to get some funding again for this source, and as there's a lot of future development planned in this area. And of course there's that big Willow Springs development, and so if all this sidewalk comes in, they could have a nice easy sidewalk access to go to Old Town Goleta. So that includes the bike and pedestrian program projects, and I'll just spend a few minutes just discussing the Safe Routes to School program of projects. So this is in the East Side neighborhood. It's what we're proposing to submit a grant application is for some sidewalk infill on the north side. This is a priority sidewalk that came out of the East Side Neighborhood Transportation Management Program. There is a lot of dense apartment buildings in this area, and the school that they report to is Cleveland Elementary, is just under a mile away. So again, this has been high on demand for a lot of these residents. What you see in red is we're also submitting a Measure A, or a Community Development Block Grant Fund application associated. It has a long name, but it's with the Parks Department would like to put a new playground at Municipal Tennis Center. There's a lot of underutilized space, and there's a big demand for, because there's so many families right in that area, to have a playground. There isn't one that families could easily walk to, and so also it's due next week. But so for the red area, we were proposing to apply for some sidewalk infill funding for that, and a couple of access ramps. And then we're also proposing, this is because so many of the developments on the north side would utilize the playground, we're proposing to do some pedestrian rapid flashing beacons at this location. So I see this project as not only safe routes to school, but also safe routes to our public facilities. And so we're really trying to make this a good synergy project. And this is just an example of what the pedestrian rapid flashing beacons look like. And that was a recent installation. Part of this was funding with Measure A as well for a safe routes to Cleveland School at Cacique and Salinas. The second project, the Safe Routes to School program, is La Cumbre Sidewalk. This has been on the city's capital radar for a long time, and a standout project out of the city's pedestrian master plan. And we've done good of getting Measure A funding for some of the crucial sidewalk pieces. So, starting at State Street, and then this is all the way up to Foothill, there's existing sidewalk here. With prior Measure A grants, we were able to do a nice sidewalk infill project that the Hope Elementary students benefited from in Bishop Diego. And in this section right here, that's out of our Measure A Cycle 2 grant to do some sidewalk infill. And we're hoping with Measure A Cycle 3, we can continue in installing sidewalk. And that, if we receive the grant, that would complete the corridor all the way from State to Foothill. So it'd be really exciting. I know there's a lot of schools that would benefit from this, and families. Another synergy that we've done, we had applied for the Active Transportation Program funding for this project. It was not awarded, but we did get awarded under the Highway Safety Improvement Program to install rapid flashing beacons at La Cumbre and Cayecita. So it'd be curb extensions, rapid flashing beacons. So when we install some of the sidewalk on the east side, but families need to go to La Colina High School, they have a crossing location. And the third and final project is the West Side access ramps. What we're proposing is 8 ramps along Sunset Avenue. And we received last year, and to be under construction soon, next month, is access ramps along San Pasqual. So we received Community Development Block Grant funding for this, which is very exciting, but we only received partial funding last year for it, and we really want to complete the project. We are submitting also a Community Development Block Grant application for these ramps as well in the event we don't get Measure A funding, or maybe it's a combination between both sources, because it's very common actually in Measure A and Community Development Block Grant funding that you don't receive 100% of the funding sources. So anyway, big benefit in the West Side neighborhood, and benefits families and travel to going to La Cumbre Junior High. And then a lot of the kids in this area of elementary age go to Adams School. And so they're to get to school, there's some transit stops along San Andreas Street. So this provides good access to get to transit as well. Oh, this were just some pictures. In this particular, there's a lot of high curbs here, so it's going to be a really nice benefit to this neighborhood with the ones going in next month. Again, some of the pictures I showed you for the before and after were pictures taken from Voluntario Street, and that was, we were happy to receive Community Development Block Grant funds the year before to construct those, and it's been a great improvement along that corridor. So in short, I hope you endorse the 7 projects and that we can continue with the grant application process. Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions? I have a couple quick ones.
Yes.
One on the Hollister Avenue sidewalk. I know that Direct Relief International is building a new project and they're subdividing that land along there. Is it possible that whoever owns the land and is subdividing it could be conditioned to do the sidewalk infill in that stretch?
Yes, that's a great question, and I believe in talking to our land development transportation planners that there is a sidewalk infill already conditioned, but it's on the adjacent streets leading up to Hollister. So I will confirm that as we finalize the numbers for Hollister.
I know the Direct Relief building is not proposed to be right on Hollister,
Right,
but
right.
that whole lot is going to
So-
be subdividted and
Correct.
I don't know what the...
So it's, and I can't read the writing right there, but it's
It's,
this, yeah, it's about
It's down
this,
on La Patera. I think.
Yeah.
In the middle blue section.
Right. Oh, thank you.
Lopez Road. It's on the way to the Amtrak station.
Lopez.
Yeah, it's on the way to the Amtrak station, I think. But anyway, I was
Yes.
just a thought that we
Yes.
might be able to save some Measure A money by
Right.
having the developer fund that. And then the other question I had, on La Cumbra, it's sidewalk on both sides of the road? Or?
Yeah, and La Cumbra, it's very spotty. So some of it's it's a mixture of both sides. So there's little kind of random sections of sidewalk.
And in general, when you're doing these sidewalk projects, when there's a bus stop, I assume you make the sidewalk wide enough at the bus stop to make it ADA accessible, to include that improvement?
Yes, and those are all the details that we would figure out in design.
Okay. And then my last question is, I live on Sunset, so does that mean I should abstain from voting on that particular aspect of this?
Sunset, where the west.
It's a public benefit.
Yeah, I mean, but I don't want to do anything improper.
Madam Chair, we'd have to get legal counsel. Just thinking about the change to the increase or decrease to the value of your property based on those access ramps being there, I would, if I was asked by the attorney how much that would be, my answer would be nominal, probably not measurable at all. So he's not here. Normally, when we have a conflict of interest on an item, also we don't even have you in the room. You're already in the room. You've already heard the whole item. So I think it'd be at the end of the day, the choice is yours.
I guess I would feel, just to be on the safe side, I would maybe appreciate a motion that recommends everything else, and then I'll step out and you can do another motion about Sunset. I mean, I don't know.
It
seems sort of silly, but I don't know.
That's completely good, and that's just recognizing a discomfort, and we can do two separate motions to get there.
Thanks. So with that, is there a motion?
Yeah, I would.
Oh, is there more discussion?
Or
some
discussion on the motion?
Some discussion or something.
I was going to move. We can still discuss after the motion is made, but I was going to move endorsement of all projects accept the west side access ramps project for now.
Second.
Okay, and is there any discussion of the motion? Susan?
Your mic.
On the Hollister sidewalk thing, when I was reading that, it dawned on me that that was city property and not county property, but I still I don't see that as a residential area that needs a sidewalk. And you said the Willow property, the development over there, that I hadn't thought of that, but that all those blocks in there, I'm not aware of any housing over there. And you're talking about development. What exactly are you talking about? You're talking about something residential that people are going to need to walk from? Not now.
Yeah,
I don't
Chair
see it
Bosch
now.
and Committee Member Horn, there is, as far as my understanding, most of the proposed development is all commercial based. So it's leases on airport property, and then there's the direct relief project that we alluded to. Where there's residential, again, is the Willow Springs, and then there's residential in Old Town Goleta outside of the main commercial corridor. Why this is also an important pedestrian route is there's the Amtrak station as well in this section.
I saw that.
And helps facilitate movement there to that
Walking?
facility.
You think people will walk there through all that industrial area to?
Yes.
It just seems a little odd.
Yes,
We
and,
do.
and the project is on the info list, and some of the things that we look when we're analyzing whether there's that need for sidewalk infill. It's called a goat trail, and the goat trail is just a where there's existing dirt and grass and vegetation that you can see a well-worn path, and that's what we have observed along this corridor.
Thank you.
If I can make a quick comment.
Sure.
First off, I've had the privilege of getting to work with colleagues in other parts of the state, and one commonly bemoaned point is that a lot of cities and counties don't have the staff, the skill set, the bandwidth to apply at a competent enough level to secure some of these ATP grants and other sources of funding. And I really have to commend our city staff. We do an exceptional job of funding these different projects, and thank you, because not every community has that, and it's something that we really need to value. One quick comment on the Hollister Avenue sidewalk thing, or actually quick question on that. I hate to peg things on a developer, but is the legality of like that hotel, is that they can only be required to put sidewalk on their frontage, because that seems what's required, even though potentially the hotel would use a greater area and that's a significant development in that area?
Either way, it's fine. Committee Member France, so because this project is in the city of Goleta, but we still, in the land development process, use the same sort of methodology, but it all comes down to what's given the proposed development and what's the legitimate nexus for public improvements. So on this one, with respect to sidewalk, it was just along their proposed property.
The hotel
frontage.
is City of Goleta.
The hotel is City of
Oh,
Goleta.
I was thinking, okay, wow, it's that close to that
And
jurisdiction.
I'm sure that there's, I don't know every single detail of the project, but there's, in addition to public improvements, or just for sidewalk, there's also a lot of things that go into play with utilities and all of that.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I'm stoked on the project list. I will just say as a general comment, and I hope that in the future sunny days will come again in terms of transportation dollars, and that the gas tax will properly fund the impact of roadways, because another major contributor to maintaining our roadways is property taxes. And our property taxes, as has been true in the past and has become less so, help do things like fill in sidewalks. And that money has evaporated. And I think the unfortunate reality is we're not likely to get all of the sidewalk funds for this. It'd be great if we do. And there's more sidewalk and more handicap ramps, which are advantageous to lots of people, not just people in wheelchairs. And anyway, thank you for your work in trying to secure those funds. Hopefully in the future, more of those funds will be available. And that's it. Thank you.
I did want to just briefly note for our Measure A requests and city matches, we have the approximates in the staff report, but we're still working on fine-tuning the final amounts.
Okay, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me. I participated in the development of the current general plan and as a member of the Community Coalition for Health. And it's very gratifying to see, Rob worked on that. We worked together on that. And it's very gratifying to see expansion of sidewalks as well as the ramps because it directly impacts reduction in obesity and hypertension. And if people are driving less, it also can reduce air pollution and asthma. These are the things that we were looking at a much, the 30,000-foot view for the general plan. But this feels really good tonight to see this where the rubber hits the road. And these sidewalks are going to increase people's likelihood to walk. So that's very gratifying. And I just would like to add, I'm fortunate to be a grandmother and to have my 92-year-old father. And I'm acutely aware of pushing strollers and dealing with people who use walkers, not just wheelchairs, but just walkers. And just a curb can be a real big deal to my dad. So I feel like that opportunity in my life is helping me have more sensitivity to the importance of these projects. So thank you.
Okay, I think we had a motion on the table, and was it seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Then any opposed? No. Okay. I'm going to step out for a moment and let you guys address the other segment of this project, and then I'll be back.
Who's our vice chair?
Bob Burnham is out.
Bob Burnham is out, so maybe our previous chair could run the meeting?
Me? Is that me?
Yeah.
I forget.
Who, me?
How quickly you forget.
Okay. All right. Yes.
I move that the remaining project be approved.
The West Side access ramps.
Yes.
I second it.
Okay. Motion and second. Any further discussion on that item? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. That's unanimous.
That was Warren on the second. Yep.
Yes. All right. If our chair doesn't come back in,
Actually, I just wanted to say, and Browning Allen's not here tonight, but he would have been. This would have been his last meeting, it was primarily Bicycle Master Plan staff members leading. But I just want to recognize Browning Allen, who will be retiring at the end of the year here, and his momentous service to the city of Santa Barbara in 15 years, and then also his long-standing career as a civil servant, sometimes in the city manager role. Just wanted to say that and just how thankful we are, and we'll be missing him, and we wish him well on his retirement.
I second that.
Okay, I think that's it. Do we need a motion to adjourn, or do we just say we're adjourned? We're adjourned.